Okay, what's up, everybody? My name is Chris. I'm your host today. I'm with Blackland Ownership. We do an interview series called Just for My People. And today I have a wonderful, special guest. I'm humbled. I'm honored. Please introduce yourself.
Peace, family. My name is Leah Penniman. I use all pronouns, and I'm the farm manager and co-director at Soulfire Farm in Mohican Territory, also known as Grafton, New York. And I'm really excited to be here with y'all.
Word. Thank you for coming on. For people that don't know, anytime I speak to folks about Blackland ownership and the rural elements of it, and it goes to a conversation of agriculture, you all are the first folks mentioned. Almost every single time. They're like, hey, did you get this book? And like, yes, we have 2 copies. I have one. My partner bought one. Actually, someone gave me one as a Christmas present last year, and we'd already bought one. And then my other friends are going to your workshops. They're telling me about the things they've learned through your website. So can you let people know what Soulfire Farm is and how you all got started? Because y'all have been doing this for a while.
For sure. But first, I want to pay homage and give thanks to our elders and our legacy farmers, because Soulfire Farm could not exist without the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, without SAFON, without Land Loss Prevention Project, the National Black Farmers Association. There's so many organizations doing this sacred work, and we're the youngsters, right? We're the new kids on the block, the returning generation, and so I want to make sure to give praise and homage to those who came before us and paved the way. But Soulfire Farm, we just celebrated our 10th birthday in August, and we are a Black, Indigenous, and people of color-led community farm that's dedicated to uprooting racism in the food system. And there's 3 basic projects we have. The first one is we take care of these beautiful 80 acres using our ancestral practices that capture carbon, increase biodiversity, and then all that yummy food and medicine is boxed up and delivered to the doorsteps of the people who need it most in our community at affordable prices. So that's the first thing. That takes the most energy, right? The second thing we do is we're a training farm. So we're working with returning generation Black and brown farmers who have that itch to come back to the lands and providing inspiration, education, resources, connections to help them make a meaningful life on land. And then the third area is that we organize with our networks regionally and nationally to get at the root cause of racism in the food system. That means we're talking about reparations, policy change, institution building, co-op building, so that truly from sunshine to plate, we can heal the food system. And, you know, it didn't start out with all that. It just started out as a family farm that was trying to feed our neighbors who were going hungry in the south end of Albany, but very quickly realized that there was a lot of need to do more work in addition to just feeding the community. So over the years, it's evolved. It's expanded beyond a family farm. Now we are a community organization that we have both a co-op and a nonprofit, and we'll see what's next.
Is this something that you always knew you were going to do, or what catalyzed or kind of prompted you to say, you know what, we're going in? We
This is not something. So I will tell you something I don't often talk about, which is that when my sister Naeem and I were very, very young, we spent almost all our time in the woods because we grew up mostly in this rural white town, and the kids were horrible to us as, you know, brown little girls. And so we just made friends with the trees. And we thought we had invented our own religion of nature worship, you know, only to find out in our 20s that we were probably remembering our ancestral ways, not inventing anything new. But all that to say, we were staunch environmental activists. I mean, defenders of the earth from age 4 or 5, putting ourselves bodies on the line in front of trees that were going to get cut down. So I always knew that I would have something to do with the planet, right? But I did not know that I would be a farmer until I got a farming job at age 16 in the Boston area with the Food Project. I just fell in love with that elegant goodness, that elegant simplicity of like planting a seed and tending it and harvesting and making sure people get fed. It was this beautiful intersection of caring about the earth and also caring about human community and justice. So from the Food Project, I went on to work at farm school in Western Massachusetts. I got a job at Many Hands Organic Farm, where I worked for 4 or 5 years, eventually helping to manage that farm. Then started a community gardens youth program in Worcester with my friend who would become my partner. And so that equipped us with the skills so that when our neighbors started to say, hey, we're hungry, could you start a farm? We're like, all right, yeah, I think we have the skills to at least try to get that off the ground.
How do you go from community garden to 80 acres? Like I'm in the city. I've only lived in Atlanta, DC, New York. Now I've spent time in North Carolina out on a farm. I go every summer. I've been around chickens, pigs, goats. I've
Oh,
been
that's
to
amazing.
areas that are rural, but I can't even conceptualize 80 acres. So how do you go from community garden to something that large?
Well, here's the thing. So, of the 80 acres, probably about 75% of it, we're doing forest farming. So, we are the maple syrup, the mushrooms, the fiddleheads, and ramps. So, it's a forest, right? So, if that makes you feel a little bit better, whittling it back down, I've got about 4 acres of orchard, some of it young, some of it old. So, that's things like apple trees, cherry trees, chestnut, peach, plum, apricot, right? So that's less intensive management. And then in my orchard, Justin Butts, who's our livestock manager, we have the sheep going through and we have the poultry going through. So the chickens and the guinea fowl, the ducks, the geese. So it's integrated between the trees and the livestock. And I mentioned that because that's a bit less labor intensive than what we have on the other side of the farm. We have a couple acres that's more intensive of vegetables and also small fruits. So your raspberries, your blueberries, strawberries interspersed with the medicinal herbs like mint, echinacea, bee balm, all of that. That's a little bit more intensive. So the patchwork works out. You know, if it was 80 acres of just vegetables, we'd have to be highly mechanized to be able to manage that at the labor level we have. But it's pretty manageable because of the choice of crops that we do. And I'm hoping maybe to get into fiber one day. I'm very inspired by a black farmer outside of Atlanta, Georgia, named Keisha Cameron at High Hog Farm, who's also on our board, and she's been peer pressuring me to get into fiber. So we'll see how we can diversify as we go forward. But you know, I worked on farms of various sizes. The many hands, we manage about 4 acres of vegetables. And let's see, the food project was about 40 acres of vegetables plus the urban garden. So it's been a mix of scales, but it's not as hard as you would think to scale up. You know, if you can grow a community garden and you like to work hard, you can scale up. You'll be all right.
And what would you say for folks who have grown up in cities and are realizing maybe these urban environments aren't the healthiest for us, or maybe we like to work with our hands and we're being guided in school, like go work in a cubicle, sit behind a computer, everyone get into coding. If that doesn't suit you, but you have no experience farming, you have no experience with your hands in the dirt, what can a person do to start the process?
Oh, I love that question. I believe that all of us belong to the earth in one way or another. So for some people, you might be satisfied just growing some bean sprouts on your counter. You can take some mung beans or even some sunflower seeds if they're raw and rinse them and put them in a jar and they're going to grow into sprouts. You know, some people are happy growing herbs or salad greens on their windowsill. And I think that's very, very important. But others of us really do have that itch to get out, do something bigger on lands. And you know, honestly, the best way to get started is to apprentice yourself to somebody to learn, especially the elders in their community. There's so many, whether it's your urban community garden or the rural farm down the street, elders who've been wanting to pass on the knowledge, right? And then their children or their grandchildren maybe aren't interested. So they have this immense wisdom that they are yearning to make sure doesn't die with them. So find the elders in your community, apprentice yourself to them, apprentice yourself to the seeds, to the soil. uh, Read Farming While Black. It's got a lot of tips, right? And bit by bit, not only will you learn, but you will also start to remember because this is inside of us as well.
You've mentioned before that it's somewhat of a spiritual practice involved with this as well, and that there's a bit more to it than just economics. Could you speak to that and how they converge? Like in the sense of when you own land, you have to pay taxes on it, or if you are utilizing land, are you just using it or are you working with it? You know,
Mm.
or how that plays out for you.
That is such a good question. So when I was studying agriculture in Ghana, West Africa in my early 20s, and I've been back a few times since, including this past year, you know, the queen mothers who are like the spiritual activist OGs of the community holding it all together, they really challenged me, you know, admonishing, is it true that in the US, y'all would put a seed in the ground and you won't pray or dance or sing or ask permission or say thank you to the earth? And then you expect the seed to grow and give you a crop. And when I admitted that that was true, they said, that's why you're all sick, right? You're all sick because you treat the earth as a commodity and not as kin. So I believe that the earth is an orisha. You know, I practice a Yoruba religion and Vodun as well. So the earth is not just an environment or a bunch of natural resources that are there for us to exploit. The earth is actually a deity. And when we engage in sacred agriculture, it means we make a commitment, one, to asking permission. We use a system of divination called Obiabata or Zafa to actually ask the earth if it's okay to do whatever we're intending to do to her. We make sure to give offerings. We make sure to honor the festivals of planting and harvest. And all of these things combined, I think not only create a harmonious relationship with the planet, but they also restore wholeness within ourselves. Because I think one of the tragedies of being a Black person in the diaspora is oftentimes what was stolen from us was not just our labor, our money, our land, right? But it was also our culinary traditions, our spiritual traditions, our languages, culture, cosmologies. And so reclaiming this sacred relationship to land, I think, is part of healing ourselves as a people.
That brings to mind an idea of like kind of just community, right? And autonomy as a community. When I first started speaking to folks about Black land ownership, and I was like, hey, I work with a lot of artists. We don't have a lot of disposable income. But if we pool our resources, between 5 or 6 of us, we can come up with enough money for a down payment on land. And you look at buildings out here in Brooklyn, $1.5 million for a very small building. We're not going to be able to pool our resources. Me and my friends aren't going to be able to pool our resources for that. But we started looking upstate New York. We started looking in Vermont, in Western Vermont, Southwestern Vermont. And it was like, wait, it will take a lot, but I can pull together $5,000. My homie can put together $10,000. My other homie can put together whatever. And as I started speaking to lawyers, they were all like, don't buy land with other people. You want to be the only owner. But then I started talking to people, and they got real estate investment trusts where there are over 100 people involved with it. Their community trust. There are all these things where we can collectively own. Can you maybe shed a little light on that?
Yes. So I actually just got off a class that I was doing with Dr. Jessica Gordon Nemhard, who is a Black scholar and philosopher and economist in the co-op movement. So if y'all haven't read her work, one of her books is called Collective Courage, and it's the history of Black co-ops. So cooperative economics is part of our DNA, y'all. So the first credit unions that ever existed on this planet were called susus, and those are Black women getting together to pool their money, right? Some of the first cooperative land ownership in this world was called the Husa system from the Krobo people in Ghana. So this idea of getting together with kin and non-kin to pool our resources and collectively own is just ancestral to us. And you're right that it's very hard in this racial capitalist society to implement it, because we also, in trying to create our co-op, working with the lawyers, they were like, wait, you want to do what? You want to do rights of nature? You want to have divinations and ask the land permission? You're trying to give Native people rights to your land? Like, they could not get their heads around any of this stuff. And we ended up having to use case law from New Zealand in order to build our co-op agreements, because the US is so anti-cooperative. And I'm not saying it's easy. We've been trained to be very individualistic. We have been trained not to know how to manage conflicts, not to share. So you have to be ready for the struggle. If you want to go in with folks, you need to make sure you have very tight agreements about who's putting in what and what happens if someone needs to get out. And, you need to take time with that stuff. But create a co-op, create an LLC and run it like a co-op, create a land trust. All of these are very good legal structures that can be adapted to the needs of shared ownership, and it's the direction we need to go. Like, we need to stop imagining that every human being is an island and start working together. So I think you should get land with your homies. I would pick upstate New York because then you'd be closer to us. Rensselaer County, that's where you should go.
We're looking, and for folks that are afraid of rural areas, that was another thing for Black land ownership, is trying to identify not like safe spaces like you see on the TV, but actual areas where you can go outside the city and, as a Black person, not feel like you have to worry about Bill and Joe from down the street harassing you all the time, or when you go in the grocery store, people acting like you're not supposed to be there. Because when I've traveled, I went through Colorado, and I'm like, there are like no Black people out here. Look at all this land, and there are no Black people. Went through parts of California where I'm like, whoa, I'm used to Oakland, LA, San Francisco, where there's some diversity. You get in parts of Northern California, you're like, nope. What do you say to folks that have that caution or kind of that a little, now I wouldn't say fear, but they're just a bit anxious about rural areas? How have you all adapted or made that a bit more safe for yourselves?
I mean, I empathize with that. I'm not going to tell anybody not to be afraid. I mean, the history of even the towns, I'm surrounded by Trump signs, even though the election's been called, I'm still surrounded by Trump signs out here. And this used to be a sundown town, meaning that Black and brown folks caught here after sundown could be shot on sight. That was the law of the town. And, I think it takes a little bit of spiteful resistance to be out here in these rural spaces. This idea that, first y'all stole this land from indigenous people, and then you tried to keep Black and brown folks out with your zoning laws and restrictive deeds, and we aren't going to give it up. We aren't going to give up this groundwater. We're not going to give up these forests and chestnuts. We're not going to give up the birds and the wildlife to you just because you're racist. So, I think it does take, you have to be willing to make a stand. But then strategically speaking, there is strength in numbers. So it's another reason to form a co-op rather than going by yourself, is because you have community, you have people that you can walk around with, that you can, protect one another. And relationship building across difference is hard, but also necessary. So, I mean, folks might have different kind of feelings about this, but probably our most successful strategy for being safe is that we buy eggs, from Jim down the road. We hire Fred down the road to clear the snow on the driveway. We hire Chet down the road for some gravel and other materials. We bring them the holiday gifts. We bring them some of the chicken that we raise. And even though they have their Trump sign flying, and even though they hate our ancestors, there is a way that interpersonally you can almost like navigate around that. And then we've had neighbors who we're in relationship with who have very different politics actually stand for us when other neighbors might try to do some BS. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
So I do think it's possible, if you can kind of stomach not looking at their MAGA hat, to like find your sort of allies in the neighborhood, and that is actually a very important safety measure to take.
And you mentioned an idea of collective work that within community can help break through some partitions. But even when dealing with folks outside of community, I definitely noticed when I was in certain rural areas, they weren't too keen on diversity, but they also recognized there was only one obstetrician in the town. If they were Black and they kept delivering the babies well, we love them. Like that's the guy that birthed my baby. And so
Exactly.
collective work is always a form of solidarity if again there's alignment and certain things in understanding.
I'm glad that you said that, because actually I think a breakthrough for us was, one, we had the sense that people were side-eyeing us and waiting to see what we were about for a few years. And after they saw we built our own house, we built our own farm, we're running this business, they put some respect on it, and then we had a hurricane in 2013 that was so bad it washed out the roads and the entire town was stranded. Like, you could not leave the town. So elders couldn't get to their appointments, no one could get any groceries. And it was going to be a long time till any state aid came. So everybody came out together with their chainsaws, their tractors, their shovels to try to build a bridge to like get folks out of the town. And everybody showed up. And it was actually a powerful moment for me, because I'll admit that, having some urban experience, I could be pretty condescending toward or judgmental towards what I saw as uneducated rural folks. And to be frank, in some of our progressive spaces, we talk a lot of smack about mutual aid societies and collective effort, but it's the folks out here who do it, like who really know how to do it. So I had to also humble myself and say, wow, I've never been to a place where people would all come out like this and just for no money, no coordination, just come out here and put the town back together like that. So, I think it's good to also be curious about what we have to learn from people who are real different from us.
Yeah, wow, that's great to hear. Well, before we go, is there anything you'd want to tell people? Like, are you working on something that you're so excited about? Well, the whole thing, but is there anything in particular you're working on that you're so excited about you want to let people know?
Well, let's talk about the Justice for Black Farmers Act 2020. So shout out to the National Black Food and Justice Alliance and SAFON and many of the orgs that I already mentioned. But, Senator Warren, to her credit, we had all written a letter to her criticizing her ag plan when she was running for president, because it didn't include Black people at all, or farm workers or any people of color. And she got a bunch of staffers to do a listening session with Black farmers across the country. And we said, here's the situation. We've lost over 16 million acres of land. We don't have training programs for our young people to get into farming. The USDA is still foreclosing on properties. Our farmers are in debt because of USDA discrimination, and on, right? The underfunding of the historically Black colleges and university ag programs. We need to do something about this. And they actually created legislation with all of our input that was just introduced into the Senate, and it is groundbreaking legislation. So you're talking about trying to pull together a couple dollars here and there to get some land. If this legislation were passed, not only would you have access to land as a form of reparations for what your ancestors lost, but you would also have training, you would have support, you would have a loan on favorable terms, a mortgage to build your house, capital to get your tractor. You would have all these resources to go ahead and get started. So please reach out to your Congress people and tell them they need to pass this legislation and make sure that Black farmers are restored to our rightful place of dignity on the land.
Wow. Yo, congrats. That's exciting. If people would like to learn more, can you let them know either the website, if they want to sign up for some of your workshops or classes, how could they do that?
Oh, we'd love to get to know everybody. You can find us on the web at soulfirefarm.org and on all the socials at soulfirefarm. And there's a live updated calendar with our events. So please do join in.
Awesome. And before we head out, I also would want to say I was initially put on or found out about you all because my friend Rahad was obsessed by the artwork from Alexa and Naima. And so a long time ago, I heard about y'all. And then I heard about y'all. Then I kept hearing about y'all. So I want to say congrats on the 10 years and congrats on everything you're working with. And when travel and movement and exchange is open again or whatever normal is going to be, I'd love to figure out a way to get up to visit y'all. And thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. And I will tell Naima and Elisa that you love their artwork. They're going to appreciate that. Hopefully we'll see each other in real life sometime soon.
All right. Peace. Take care. And enjoy the snow.
Thank you. Take care.
Yeah.